So you guys have to kind of imagine if we were doing this in a classroom setting, normally I would have a figure model that would be changing poses every 10 seconds, every 15 seconds at the most. So these are kind of, again, it's an exercise that you should be doing very quickly because you're practicing looking at the pose in a very general way. So here, let's do this one. And look at the way I did that. Again, I'm kind of flowing through this whole gesture, and it really isn't even, if we were to overlay this on the photograph, these lines would kind of move a lot of times outside of the figure. Like I just went across from, so started in the figure's left foot, up through his spine to his it's so hard looking at this backwards, to his right foot, and then I bounced, across, like basically through his body and through the air to this left arm and then to the right arm, because again, the arms, even though this pose is really dramatic in terms of the placement of the arms, is not like as important as the weight of the feet. But I'm not worrying about trying to just fill in only where the figure is going to go, because again, this is an exercise that's just about trying to get something down on paper, really. Something that conveys what we're looking at. Yeah, I mentioned a moment ago that this is a great way to start a drawing. So even outside of, just doing this exercise and purely just limiting yourself to these 10 seconds, what do you do if you begin a drawing that you're going to do over a long period of time, once those 10 seconds run out, once you get this very basic, pretty abstract little scribble down? Well, you want to continue again in the same spirit as the gesture drawing of trying to think about the whole and prioritize, really just like building up essentially the entire drawing all at once. And so the way you would approach this, I'm going to start, looking at this figure, I'm going to start with a quick gesture, again, capturing the pose. And I'm going to start the drawing very lightly because, I want to allow myself the liberty to make these marks that might not ultimately correspond with exactly what the finished polished drawing is going to look like, without having to go back and erase. That's going to be too tedious. So if you start lightly, you can get darker and darker as you begin to refine. But from there, after getting this gesture down, the next thing I'm going to focus on are the largest shapes of the figure, and then move on to the smaller shapes. And the reason why I do this is because the largest shapes, of course, take up the majority of the pose, right? Again, so I'm always thinking about what is going to get the most done at any given moment, what is most important. Notice this line that I put down, just blocking in, the torso and the legs. So once again, thinking about the weight of the pose, the legs are more important than even the head. So a mistake I often see from students who are first starting with figure drawing is they almost always start with the head, and that's kind of the worst place to start, because the weight, it's for one, focusing on something very small, but also thinking about something that is not intrinsic to the pose, if that makes sense. So you'll notice again, these shapes are very general. They're kind of just scribbly. Again, I'm continuing to use this really kind of flowing, continuous line, and I'm not getting hung up on like really trying to like accurately try to very carefully capture exactly what the contour of this calf is. That's something that's going to come later. So again, starting with a quick gesture. It's not super accurate, but then notice, like, almost extending out of that gesture, I am still just continuing these flowing marks that try to capture the aspects of the pose that are really important and do that in a very general kind of way. So I'm very kind of like efficiently, capturing as much of the pose again as possible. And now that I have kind of the large shapes mapped out, the smaller shapes mostly mapped out, this is all about getting something down on paper, as I mentioned earlier, because once you do, it makes your job easier in terms of looking back and forth from your paper to your subject, being able to make comparisons to figure out, oh, well, so these arms, if I look at the figure, I made them much too short. So that's going to be my next move, is to kind of bring these out, make them a little bit longer. The foot here is a little bit large, like the placement of these feet. I'm going to have to bring this foot up. In terms of small details, by the way, feet are a great thing to get in relatively early again, because that's where the weight of the pose is. But anyway, so it's all about making comparisons. The secret about drawing is that it's all about relationships, not just like the relationship between like what you have on the page and like your subject, but also the relationship of these different parts that you're drawing. So I can kind of, I just made, even the way I was talking about just now, I was comparing how this foot lines up with this one. And so that's another way to kind of think about which details of a gesture of a pose you might want to focus on, is thinking about like what's useful in terms of giving me kind of like a map of where things are. Like what's going to make it easier for me to make comparisons across the figure. Notice how I'm moving all around the figure as I draw. What's going to help me make these kinds of comparisons from one side of the figure to the next. The proportions of the head are pretty off. So one detail that's kind of like that in terms of what I'm saying with these reference points is I'm noticing in this pose you can really see the collarbone of this model, and these kind of details like the collarbone that are like little tiny things, but they're like noticeable, that relate to like the internal structure of the figure, because it's like a bone. It's pretty sturdy, and it also gives you a reference point to make comparisons, vertically across the figure. So I can see the way this collarbone kind of like lines up with the bottom of the hand vertically. It's kind of, the hand's a little bit above it. I can also see the way it lines up with the pelvis here. It's a little bit to the left. So I can kind of make adjustments, again, based on these little tiny internal details. The knees are another good example. That's something that you can usually guide some of these reference points. So again, what I'm doing here is starting light with a gesture, starting general, and then working my way gradually towards more and more kind of very specific marks and darker marks,